Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I'm very excited tonight because as I continue recording these episodes for the DC December, as we venture into some of DC comics that have recently come out and will be coming out as we go into 2025, I have a writer who's returning to the podcast. I'm super excited to talk to him. He was on here before talking about Flash Gordon. Now we're going to talk about a different Flash. But please welcome to the podcast, or welcome back to the podcast, Jeremy Adams. Jeremy, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm great.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to talk to you. I really enjoyed your Flash run.
Thank you.
And I mean, to start off, I think anytime I have a writer on here who's done indie stuff, but also writes for the big two, I'm just always amazed. It just seems like the most daunting task out of any writing in comic books. I don't know if that's true or not, having never written for Marvel or DC, but you have to, not only just come up with your story and work with the artist like you would in any collaboration or creator-owned comic. You have to deal with, decades of lore possibly or continuity. You have to fit in the last story. You have to work with editorial in terms of where the story is going to go and if like the job is getting handed off to somebody else eventually.
Right.
I guess just like, how do you go about when you kind of get tapped to take on something like the Flash? And I know you had done some DC work before, but when you get to do like what could potentially be a longer run with Flash and now with Green Lantern, and then moving into like Aquaman, like how do you approach that initially when you get that opportunity?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I have been doing film and television, right? And that's where I made my career, is in, especially in animation. And because I had done so much Warner Brothers animation, I was put on a list. It was during this whole 5G thing. So I'd never done comics. I'd always wanted to do comics because that was like the passion as a kid. And my dad had drawn some comics. So there was a little bit of like, not only just the love of it, but also a little stick it to him. so when they put my name, on this list, and I went in, and I'm pitching, and I think, this is it. Oh my gosh, I'm finally gonna get to do a comic book. And I was working on the show Supernatural at the time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be able to get a comic book. And then Dan Didio got let go, AT&T imploded. And I thought, oh man, I was so close. But my name was still on the list. And then they asked me to do a couple of shorts because they had changed 5G into Future State. And I had done two backups, one in Philip Kennedy Johnson's Future State, Superman World at War. And the other one was in Suicide Squad by Robbie Thompson. And that one was really my first one. My editor at the time was Mike Cotton. Name was on a list. I think he asked my friend Tim Sheridan about, hey, there's some people on this list. And he's like, oh, Jeremy's great. And so I did that backup where I introduced Gold Beetle and all this stuff. And I was just like, they let me make a character? Like, I was just flabbergasted. And then afterwards, he said, I was not the first person they came to about the Flash. I'm sure I wasn't the second person. I probably wasn't even the third. But he said, hey, you have any ideas for the Flash? And I'm like, bro, I'm a nerd of a certain age. I've got an idea for everything, And I kind of pitched in this quantum leap, and he just quiet for a second, and he goes, well, that's better than what we got. So you get to take over the Flash. And there was no indication it would last long. There was, if anything, I was told up front, you'll be lucky if you get 12 issues. That was kind of like what they said. They said, usually we change creative teams after 12 issues. And, but I very early on, there's a certain amount of like self-loathing and, this lack of self-confidence that writers had, but there's also a bit of an ego there too. And I was doing this thing, and I was super excited about it, and I started working toward kind of retconning Wally, and I was also thinking in my head, I want to try, and I said it. I said it once when we were doing Flashpoint Beyond with Tim and Jeff, and I said I really want to get to issue 800. That was my goal. I said I really want to get to issue 800, and and I got chastised. It was like, you know, it's not
Oh,
gonna
really?
happen.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
wow.
kind of like it was like don't get over your skis, buddy. And but it kept going, and fans seemed to respond to it, and I was just having a great time, and it helped that the parent company kept shuffling. Like it kept getting bought out, people were getting fired, and I'm just this knucklehead nerd that's turning things in on time. And I think because I turned things in on time, there was a level of we don't have to worry about him. You know, there are other books we can worry about. This guy's turning it in on time. Fans seem to like it, and so they just kept me on. Then I got really, you know, invested in it. So when they asked me to move off of it, I was devastated. I was really sad about it. I was really sad because the first thing I said was, "Are the kids going to be okay?" Like, because I was so invested in Wally's kids, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Maxine.
Well, I mean, look,
Um,
as a comic fan myself, and you know, my growing up, my younger brother and I, Bobby, I was always a Green Lantern fan. He was a fan of the Flash, and I've had
yeah,
different favorite Green Lanterns. He was always more of a Barry Allen guy.
yeah,
But you know, I would collect Green Lantern. He would collect the Flash, and you know, look, they're comic books, right? I
yeah,
try not to be somebody. I'm 45 years old. I try not to be somebody who's like screaming about characters
right,
on the internet. Let them tell the story. But I will say that like when in the continuity, when like Wally went away and then kind of came back, and I guess it made for some good storytelling. Like he didn't have like his family or everything, but I was just like, to me, as an you know, and as an older person with like two kids, like I always think like
yeah,
that was the more interesting
yeah,
storytelling as like an adult. Like, yeah, like how does somebody do that?
yeah,
How does Wally deal with these things? Like, oh, and like have, you know, a wife and a
yeah,
family.
yeah. And
And
I thought that was interesting because like nobody else was doing it in the DC universe. Nobody was really doing it. It was like, here's the most well-adjusted superhero that has gone through absolute trauma. But I was back to your first question. I was just saying, like, how do I do it? I didn't know how to do it. That was it. That was like me just learning on the job. I was just a huge fan and diving into continuity and diving into the history and trying to fill holes and just, you know, make these characters come alive for me. Like I'm very blessed because I'm the first person that gets to experience these stories, and they're not so much me going like, I'm not a careful planner. You know, I kind of have like, oh, wouldn't this be cool or wouldn't this be cool? Then I try to like piece it together a little bit.
yeah,
And but working for the big two, I mean, that's all I've known really.
yeah,
I did Flash Gordon, but that came after, you know, that's from Mad Cave, and it's still a big, you know, kind of IP. But all I know is the big two. I want to do more creator own and indie stuff, but right now there's a little bit of the golden handcuffs. Like I'm not gonna stop because they let me in the door. These fools, you know what I
right.
mean? They're letting me run. They're like, you're letting me write Green Lantern and now Aquaman, and like I'm like, and I'm always gunning for the Batman, some Batman title. You've got 12 Batman titles. Just give me one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Doesn't even have to be the main one. Like, what do you got?
no,
What do you got
it
floating
could be
around out there?
like the sort of tales of the Dark Knight in the
Yeah.
shadow. You know, it's like I'm
Right.
in, whatever. Give me something. But yeah, you know, I'm having a blast, and with like with the Flash, I was able to. I think it was more conducive to doing a lot of weird, wild things. I could do like a one-off or two one-offs, you know. Whereas with Green Lantern right now, it presented an interesting challenge because Jeff Thorne's run ended, and there was a lot of like loose threads, And I found myself, and it was funny because, my editor was just like, just write a paragraph that says everything went back to normal. I'm like, no, bro, like, I'm a nerd. Like, I'm a nerd. So, like, my story is going to be about the loose threads. Like, I want to take that in. I love that. I know for a fact there's some people that other writers that hate that. They hate having to deal with the continuity before it. But to me, it presents not just a challenge, but a wonderful opportunity, because that's what's so cool about comics to me is it is a continuous story. When I read the X-Men, it was fairly seamless growing up. It seemed like if a writer changed, it just like, they were continuing the story. And I think that's a cool way to go. So John split himself in two in the Green Lantern Corps, or Green Lantern, the John Stewart Green Lantern series, and he made this giant source ball, and I had no idea what it was. No one had any idea what it was. There was a lantern that changed colors, and I'm like, what could this be? And that propelled my story in a way. So I love it. I love it when somebody gives me. And by the way, getting a character that hasn't been around for a little bit, like with Wally. Wally hadn't been the main Flash for a long time, and what a thrill! What a real blessing for me to be able to be the guy who gets to write about Wally. And the same thing with Hal. Hal hadn't been the center of the Green Lantern book for a long time, so being able to like bring Wally back, I mean Hal back on Earth, and do that has been so much fun too. And then with Aquaman, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm nervous because it's like Aquaman's hard. I mean, I feel like it's a hard character because I don't know how many people are like, yeah, Aquaman. There are some, trust me, but I really want to make it a book that people enjoy. And I'm absolutely, every time I turn in a script, I'm just like terrified, A, that no one will like it, B, that I'm going to get in a fight with my editor, you know, and I'm just having fun and trying to do the best I can. And they'll let me play with a lot of characters. Like, I'll be like, well, what's happening with this character? Like I think one of the Absolute Power tie-ins that I did, I was like, well, what are you doing with Hawk and Dove right now? Can I just use Dove for a minute? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, great. And what's absolutely terrible, and this is totally unfair to every reader, is that I immediately start thinking of a story that is going on with Dove. And so I'll put a line. It's like, after what happened to Hank. And people are like, well, what happened to Hank? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I have this whole other story that's going on. I don't even have that book. I don't even have there's nobody even saying like, hey, you want to do a Hawk? Nobody's saying that. But in my head, I've got another story going on. I've got a story with, like, somebody mentioned the other day, like, hey, why does the Unseen in Oa keep talking about the Starheart? I'm like, I know why. It's terrible. It's terrible because I've got all these other stories in my head that someday I hope to exploit. But I love planting Easter eggs and getting like really astute readers are like, wait, what was that? Like, wait, what was that? Like, get you excited about something. And I'm
Right.
generally somebody that I'll keep bringing stuff back. Like, I am terrible. Nothing's wasted. I'm like, all right, remember 12 issues ago? Time to pay it off, guys.
But see, I love that. I mean, look, I'm of two minds about continuity. I don't think continuity should ever stand in the way of a good story, but also when you can do things like that, when you can mention something in issue 2 and bring it back however many issues later, like,
Yeah.
so that you can, astute readers can pick up on that and be excited about it. I mean, I do love that too. And especially, Green Lantern in particular, Hal Jordan's history, and since Rebirth and he came back, all the different like iterations and the different things that have been done, it almost seems like, a writer would be hard pressed to be like, all right, well, what hasn't Hal and the Green Lantern Corps been through? I mean, they got, there was the War of the First Lantern, and then like the Third Army, I think they were called, and then they broke through the Source Wall, and then there was Relic, and there were like all these different things. But when I started your run, and Hal's, or the recent run and Hal's, back on Earth again after everything from Dark Crisis. I really, I I don't always like when they reset things, so we can have a younger character. Like I feel like Hal has been through this stuff. There is that
Yeah.
history. I love the scene with him and Barry investigating,
Right.
Ferris Air when Sinestro shows up. Like, there's just so many really great moments that I feel like, oh, these characters, they have been around. They still have that
Right.
camaraderie and friendship, and those moments I felt were really like exciting to read and to see. And not to mention
Yeah.
the fact that you get to play with all these other, as the issue goes on and readers will see, you get to play with all these other different characters and start
Right.
to, I think introduce these new elements with what's coming in January is the Fractal Lanterns?
Yeah. 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 For the fractured spectrum. And
Yeah.
we've kind of seen some of that with the appearance of Carol's ex fiance, and start making sense of some of the stuff that's going on in the universe. But you never close off a story. It's like the story's ending, but there's another story behind it, right? And
Yeah.
but I agree with you with the Barry Hal thing. To me, when I first started at DC, there was the mono. It was like, hey, everything that's happened. That was kind of what they told me. I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. But you kind of pick your, the greatest hits, and for Hal especially, like you said, there's all that stuff, and I don't
Right.
see why we need to sweep it under the rug. I think it's kind of an interesting thing to keep going. I will say that I think what's really interesting to me is that you have all the Silver Age stuff. You have all of uh, the Bronze Age stuff, but really the next big shockwave is when Jeff Johns reinvented that character, and reinvented the mythology in a way that
Oh yeah.
I think will permeate the character until the end of time. And so obviously I feel like that was when I were reading it really heavily. So obviously I think my run is heavily influenced by the mythology that was set up there.
Yeah.
Um, but also I'm also trying to move a different direction when everybody else moves this direction. So I was doing Wally, and it was a family book, and it was becoming Fantastic Four at a certain point, and that was because there was nobody doing that. Like everybody, it was kind of like, it wasn't. And then I don't think because of me, but like when I left that book, it was like the super family was huge. Green Arrow's family was back. There was a lot of families suddenly, and
Yeah.
everybody was also focused on legacy characters. Like Nightwing was leading the Titans, and I thought this is interesting now because I'm now writing a character that's not a legacy character, not really, and so having that discussion with Barry is more of, hey, you look at us, we're getting older, but these guys are now stepping into their own as heroes. So where does that leave us? And with Hal, especially because he's this kind of like delayed adolescence, you know, it's like, hey, buddy, you got this girl there that you keep leaving, and you love her, and I, I mean, I was a little older when I got married and stuff because I was a knucklehead, and I just feel like I could commiserate with, you know, it's kind of time to put some of those, because I don't know, part of the reason I was writing it that way was this guy probably had no money in his bank account. The idea that like no one needs a test pilot anymore because no one's going to be making jets anymore. It's all going to be drones. It's all going to that's the way it is. So fundamentally, that character is going to change. And what does that mean for the character? And so his whole world's changing. And anyways, it was fun because I felt like you get to put a little bit of more maturity on Hal in a way that he's never really had. He's a leader when it comes to his like role as a Green Lantern, but his personal life is kind of a mess generally. But it's been fun to explore it, kind of think about, oh, maybe he's maturing. Maybe some of that wisdom he's gleaned, this guy's died and been the Spectre, been this, been that. I think it's interesting. I think it makes for an interesting character who's still willful and still a little arrogant, but I don't know. I like exploring a little bit of that maturity, even though, the entire universe is melting down right now in the Green Lantern Corps. So
I really like it. I mean, just to touch on something you said earlier. I mean, I was away. I liked comics as a kid, and then through
yeah.
school and high school,
Yeah.
college, even law school, I got away from it. And it was actually I went to just happened to go to a convention in Philly just for something to do, and I saw all the ads and merch for Blackest Night, and I was like, well, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, this looks neat. And I
Yeah.
always liked the Green Lantern, and then I went and bought all the the
Yeah.
collected hardcovers of Blackest Night. Of course, I had to sit there reading them with the internet open because I didn't know who
Right.
75%
Catching up.
of the characters were.
YouTube catch-up videos.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
to try and figure out. I really liked it, but then I went back and I started reading all the stuff that I, you know, had missed out on. Well,
Yeah.
most of it.
Yeah.
And then I
have
got
that
back
DC,
into reading
I
it.
have DC Infinite and Marvel Unlimited just for that, because there are huge
Yeah.
gaps. Because exactly like you, I came out here, I came out to LA after I graduated. I had no money. I couldn't spend it on comics. And then there was a moment where I had money and I was just like, oh my gosh, it was like during the countdown to New 52 and all that stuff. And
Oh,
I was just like,
okay.
this is so awesome. And I was buying everything. And it was like DC was doing that and Marvel was doing I think it was Civil War. And I was like, this is epic awesome.
Yeah.
And then I was buying everything, just spending gobs of money, that I didn't really have. And then there was it was like a 2 or 3 year run that was just like everybody was knocking it out of the park as far as I was concerned. And then life got in the way, and then
Yeah.
you dip
Sure.
out.
And
But
then you gotta.
I feel like it's a real exciting time at DC right now. There's a lot
I
of
I
Marvel stuff
agree.
I dig, but it's like Marvel's a little more impenetrable for me as a fan. Like it's hard to figure out where to read and what to start, and I'm not sure. And they keep doing number one, so I'm not sure which number one this is and what version of continuity. DC, I'm appreciative because in some of the books they have the legacy issue numbering, which I really like, but also I feel like there's a concerted effort between a lot of writers to try to keep the continuity going and talk to each other. And then I am the luckiest SOB because I get to work with these freaking phenomenal artists that sometimes they get lost in the shuffle talking about these stories and stuff, but to me, like Zermanico on Green Lantern, he's undeniable. Like he
Yeah.
makes that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he's so cinematic. He's so good, and I'm constantly like, "What do you want to draw, man? Like, I want to keep you happy, bro." you know. And there's a whole thing with like the power battery, and it's like in his hometown. I'm like, "Yeah, let's put it in there." I'm all about stuff like that. Same with Will on Flash Gordon. I'm like, "Bro, what do you want to draw?" He's like, "Dinosaurs." I'm like, "Dinosaur guards, let's go." I'm constantly doing that. I'm doing that with John Timms. Of what can I help? And Fernando Passerin, who he is so excited to do Green Lantern Corps that he's just like, whatever you want to do. I'm like, no, Fernando, like you're my man. Like, what do you want to do? So it's been great. It's been great to like work with these guys that just they're so much better than my stupid words. It's like it's such a thrill because there's such a I said this before, but I'm superficial. If I even if I hear a book is really, really good and I open it and the art sucks, I don't know if I'll keep reading. Like I'm superficial like that.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's such
I get it.
it's so great that I know they're gonna steal them from me at some point, and I'll cry and cry. but I'm really grateful. I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork in terms of because I think you worked with a few different folks,
Yeah.
but I mean, the artwork in Flash, and I've just like I said, I've gotten through volume 1. I really loved it, so I'll get volume 2. Yeah, but I read the Civil Core one shot, and I mean, I could pick up what was happening, what was going on. I
Well,
loved
it
seeing.
helps because you did all the Philip stuff, you know, and Philip and I were
Yeah, I
for a
know
while.
the war journal stuff from John Stewart.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, there was a big conversation where Philip and I were talking a lot, and I'm just very much like, you can't, you know, you just did a big run. Like, we can't just leave that stuff, you know? And so it's kind of crazy because people that were just reading Green Lantern are probably like, what is happening? You know? He's got a construct of his dead sister and like the soul of his mom and a ring and Dark Star ring. Like, if you weren't reading it, you're like, what is happening, you know? And
yeah,
I
it
was
is
like,
it is a lot, but I mean
it's a
it.
lot.
I love seeing these scenes of everybody, like some of the lanterns together. You know, there's a couple of moments in this the Civil Core. There's, you know, with John and Hal and
Yeah.
Guy and
Shepherd. Yeah.
Shepard, and I really
Yeah.
love all that stuff. So to see, like, to think that we're getting a Green Lantern Core book, and it's going to
Yeah.
have, and you know, some of the other lanterns like Joe Mullen and
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
We're excited
Jessica
about that.
Cruz, who is
Yeah.
Jessica Cruz, I think has become my new favorite Lantern. I love whenever she shows up, so
Yeah.
I'm excited to have her back.
I think she's cool. I think what's hard is, you know, fandom's hard because their expectation is that every lantern, like, you know, this is what I hear. It's like, there's too many Earth lanterns, but you better give everyone, you know, enough time. And then also some aliens. And you're like, you know, so I think what Morgan and I have thought out is like, we're doing these like mini arcs that the A story is concentrating on, you know, John, and the B story will concentrate on, you know, Guy or whatever. And then we'll flip it and we'll go, okay, well, this one's about Baz and Kelly maybe. And then the B plot will be about something else. And so we're trying to evenly distribute it. And yeah, there'll be alien lanterns, but like, um, it, it's hard. You got a one book every month, and it's going to tie in closely with what's happening in the Green Lantern book. So they're both going to be kind of the meta narrative or the macro narrative is going to be similar. They're both having to deal with the fallout of the fractured spectrum stuff, and it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited. You know, I'm excited to, you know, my goal and what Morgan and I have talked about, and what my goal with Green Lantern, and not just Green Lantern, but Green Lantern Core, is like, I want this to be the space that if you want to know what's happening with space characters, you come to Green Lantern. You want to see Space Cabbie? What's happening with the Omega Man? Like, I want you
Right.
to like everything that's going on, because sometimes I think there's been runs of Green Lanterns where it gets so siloed. It's just Green Lanterns and it's just emotional spectrum. And it's like, yeah, but what about the Reach? What about like all these planets? What about these
Yeah.
other aliens? What about the Thanagarians? What about the Ranians? Like all that stuff. It's like, what's the Star Trek of it? What's happening in, you know, all that stuff. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, is hefty. There's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to tie into what's going on with, the United Planets and all of
Yeah,
that stuff as
yeah.
part of your storyline. And
Yeah, I'm an idiot. That's what this comes down to. Like, because again, it comes down to, I could have wrote a paragraph that said everything was back to normal. No, you know, I had to sit there and it's funny, like, people were giving some crap about Jeff Thorne's run. I know there was differing opinions. I enjoyed it. I thought it was this really. I read it in a sitting, and I actually think as a book, if you read it as a singular story, I think you would be like, man, this is really ambitious sci-fi, like high concept sci-fi. And I
I
think,
just felt like it was just something that I hadn't seen, especially in a Green Lantern
yeah,
book in a while. And
yeah,
look, I've said it before on this podcast. Something may not work. It may not be for you. I did like it as well, but I'll
yeah,
always appreciate a writer, an artist, whatever, taking a big swing, you know?
yeah.
And
Same,
that's
same,
what that
same.
felt like.
That's what I agree. I agree. I'm the same way. And there were so many interesting little Easter eggs in there that, you know, whether it was the United Planets, whether it was the Guardians off the table, I'm like, I talked to him a couple times at conventions way before. I think I was doing the Flash, maybe. I don't know. But I haven't seen him or talked to him since then. But you always have to be sensitive too, because it's like, hey, I took out all those ideas that you had and I did my own thing with them. And I don't want to feel, Mark Waid told me after he wrote the Flash for ages, and he said
Yeah.
afterwards it was he couldn't read it. He said he was too close to it. I feel the same way. Like I can't. I think Simon, not only is he incredibly handsome and intelligent, like I met him, I was like, hey, knock it off. Like you only get so many points on your D&D character, buddy. He's like this
Right.
tall brick guy, and I'm just like, geez. But like I can't read it because I'm
No.
just too close to it. I'm just too
Yeah.
close to it. And I bet in a couple years I'll go, well, I'll go read it now. And I'll
Yeah.
probably love it. But I can't do it.
I mean, I get it. I think it makes sense. To stick with your Flash run real quick, there was something
Yeah.
I did want to say in terms of the end, the time heist storyline.
Oh yeah. Which
Um,
was rushed, but yeah.
I mean, but what I wanted to say is it screamed to me like a creative team that was having a ton of fun,
Yeah.
and as a result, like I loved every character that showed up that I didn't necessarily like expect, and
Like
the villain
Omega
of it
Man
all,
Man.
Omega Bam. Are you credited as like one of the creators of that? That's like is
Yeah.
that the first time that guy ever showed up,
Have
right?
you not read the issue of the Flash when the wrestlers across the multiverse land on Earth?
It's
And
just like
it's worse. I literally have a custom belt on my wall I made with like the Grant Morrison map, and it has all this stuff. And my mentor Jim Krieg and I in the garage of Warner Brothers. I thought, it was before New York Comic Con. I go, dude, you got to help me. Let's cut a wrestling promo for this issue. And I got like a mullet wig, and I did my best, almost like, all right, brother, whatever. And we did this wrestling promo, and we thought, oh my gosh, people are going to lose their mind. I think 2 people have seen this promo. Like no one watched this promo at all. And we posted it about, right before, I think I was on the flight to New York. And I thought, when I get off this flight, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. No one said anything. So
oh
yeah, I did this thing. And so when Omega Man showed up there, what's hilarious is if you read Green Lantern, there's a Green Lantern backup in which I explain how Omega Man got knocked out of the stratosphere. And because I was like, I gotta keep this continuity going.
yeah.
Because I love Omega Man, and I love Gold Beetle, and I love the Terrifics, and I had a whole like 6-issue arc. And I left it back door, obviously, because you can see that last couple frames where Wally has like a beard and he's like, someday I'll tell that story. I think it's hysterical. I think it's a great story. I know exactly what it is, and I think it'd be really, really funny. But yeah, with all those crazy characters in that, it's just lunatics inside that.
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, I just thought it was great, and I wasn't like when they first showed up. I just didn't it felt like something that could have been like in an issue in like 86 or 87, and like you just like took it out and brought it in. I'm like Googling. I'm like WAM Omega Man. It's like, is this?
It's like, nope. Just me. And in fact, when I wrote it and I sent it out, I was like, son of a gun. That would have been a great independent comic. Like, what an idiot am I? I just handed it over to the multi-million-dollar conglomeration, And this guy that, because he's the, Wham belt holder, he gets, they enhance his power set. Like, it's so stupid. I mean, the fact that I got a custom belt, and I was actively trying to challenge wrestlers to a match. Like, hey, you want this belt? You gotta fight me for it. Like what? But it was so
I
fun.
loved it.
Yeah.
That I mean, your whole run, but that wrap up, yeah, I just felt it. I just really enjoyed it. Like seeing
Well, thank you.
Wally, react to everything, Granny Goodness, who else? Metamorphose there,
Yeah, the
Plastic Man,
Terrifics,
like,
Plastic
yeah, the
Man.
Terrifics, everybody in that last issue. I just think it just, I
Well,
just
and
felt it
also
was
at the time,
a
like
really fun issue.
the funny thing is that was the story. The original conceit for the story was, um, I had known that the robot Hour Man had disappeared off of continuity, and I was reading all this stuff, and I've been doing this stuff. If you go back, it's really interesting that I like Gold Beetle and Time Point and Planet Flash and all the stuff that I seeded from my very first issues, where the moment where he sees Irie later on, and like he sees his future daughter, and his daughter goes, "Come with me," and you see Planet Flash. And from that time I was like, yeah, Planet Flash is actually Time Point, and that's where they're going to do all their stuff. And I was seeding that over years.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I
wow.
had this kind of like just thinking about all of that. And so the story where Wade is born, I remember pitching this. It was to my first editor. I said, yeah, I want to do an issue where it opens with Wally and he can't slow down. And he can't slow down, and he's haggard, and everybody around him is kind of frozen. And you realize he's been running because his kid is like, there's an explosion in the delivery room, and he knows the minute he slows down, and he doesn't have enough energy to go back in time. He knows the minute he slows down, um, his kid is dead. And then and then of course at the end of it, he falls from exhaustion, place explodes. And then I was like, and then the next issue, the Titans are there with them at the grave site, blah 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 blah. And then suddenly they turn on the machine. Our Man shows up and says, "Your kid's not dead. He's been abducted." And at the time, I remember my editor going, "Nobody wants to see a kid's funeral." I was like, "Whatever. You don't know drama." Click. And as I hung up the phone, I was like, it was like within seconds. I was like, yeah, but I love the idea that speedsters run so fast that everything slows down. Wouldn't that be interesting if somebody attacked them in a way that was so fast that they are just normal speed, or at least, even a little heightened speed? And that's where the 1 minute war came from. So then
Oh,
after
okay.
that, where I introduced Wade in that, because Wade is in that, having been captured by the Fraction, um, and then really pushed the whole Gold Beetle saving everybody from Heroes in Crisis, Time Point, blah 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 blah. Now it's Planet Flash. I was really trying to button things up because I was a few issues into 1 Minute Ward when they told me that I was few issues writing 1 Minute War when they said I was going to be like
Okay.
taken off the book.
Right.
So that Time Heist, I knew I only had a couple issues, and I had this whole bigger idea, and I was like, I'm just gonna speed through it a little bit, because the whole idea with Donna's kid and Mr. Terrific's kid, and there was one other. It was there was another kid. Who was it? Donna's kid, Mr. Terrific's kid, and I think it was Aquaman's kid, maybe.
Okay.
No, it was Garth's kid. It was Garth and Dolphin's kid, I believe. And so the fact that Granny Goodness was plucking these heroes, children at a time, and then training them to be these male furies, I thought was super cool. And at the time when I was thinking about it, I had reached out and asked, like, everybody seemed to be fine with it. And then suddenly I did it, and they were like, you have to say these are from another universe, except for Mr. Terrific. They said I could keep fair play. And I was trying to make this kind of like interesting autistic son of Mr. Terrific, and which still has gotten me in a lot of trouble, hilariously. But I thought, oh no, I couldn't tell that story. But it was fun when I did the Jay Garrick miniseries, pairing Fair Play, Mr. Terrific's son, with Quiz Kid, which is a Golden Age character that Jeff Johns brought back, it came to life. And I was like, oh my gosh, these two are awesome together. They are awesome. And even in Green Lantern, it's been really fun because everybody is seeing these characters. Ellie, who's the construct of John's dead sister, has met Kelly inside her mind, who is Teen Lantern.
Yeah.
And there's something there that sparks. It's just like having Ace or Kid Flash and Impulse. Writing them together, and suddenly I'm like, oh my gosh, I love these two together. I love these two. So there's something about some of those pairings that really spark for me as a writer, being like, oh my gosh, they're great. I love having these two. And the same thing with Ellie and Kelly. I'm finding them to be really interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait. I'm really excited for more Green Lantern. But yeah, I did just want to mention I about your Flash run. I really do.
Yeah,
I thought it was great.
I mean, I can't believe they let me, like, Gold Beetle and Omega Bandman go after like the most powerful creatures in all the DC universe, and we don't even get to see their fight. We just see them like, yeah, we beat them. And I was like, I absolutely thought when I threw in the Anti-Monitor and somebody was coming back like, no, Jeremy, they can't beat up the Anti-Monitor. But no one did.
Oh man. So just to turn a little bit, I know because we have the continuation of your Green Lantern run. We have the Green Lantern Corps,
right? With Morgan Hampton,
with Morgan Hampton, also writing, and then now, and we mentioned Aquaman, and I agree with what you said earlier. I think Aquaman can be a tough character. I mean, that was another character that Jeff Johns with the New 52 going back to 2011 kind of really, I think, had another reinvention of that character when he came out in the New 52, and then there's been a ton of writers have taken the reins to try and tell a cohesive Aquaman story with various degrees of success. Some I thought were okay, some I've really liked, and but now I've read the solicits for like your first 2 issues, and it
don't read those. They don't make sense.
Well, even if they only make sense a little bit, it sounds like you are again taking on a lot here in terms of the world of Aquaman.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I think with like all those characters, like whether it was Wally, Hal, or now Arthur, it's like I try to strip it down to be about that character, at least at the start, so that the reader gets very invested in who these people are as people. And then it gets bigger, right? It always gets a little unwieldy. With this run, I can say that I have three acts of it, 3 stages that I want to tell.
Okay.
Whether or not I get to tell them is all going to be about sales, Like if people are on board by the second issue, if people are like, we're in, then I think I'll be okay. But I think the second issue is going to be a big departure for Aquaman in a lot of ways. And I think you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it, but it's not Aquaman just, saving people off of a ship, and it's definitely, there's more of a high fantasy feel to it, I guess, a little bit, a little Conan the Barbarian vibe going on. So I'm having fun with it. I know what I want to do with it personally, but again, you always have to, you're dealing in a collaborative universe, you're dealing in a continuous universe. And I don't know, man. I hope fans and I hope readers go, wow, this is great. I want to read more of this. But they may not. So, so I may only get act 1 of the 3 acts I want to do. I don't know. I hope not.
Look,
I really think if it does well enough, I really think there are going to be 3 acts that are going to be like, oh my gosh, when you look back on, you'll go, that's really wild that he did that.
Well, I hope I hope you get to do it. I mean,
So,
I love your writing. I mean, I told
thank
you
you.
when you were on the Green Lantern, you were involved in the. I mean, Supernatural is one of my favorite shows of all time, and
Yeah.
I said this before, but if any listeners didn't hear the Green Lantern episode, you were involved with the Scooby Natural
Yeah.
episode, which I felt when I first I told you this before, so this is really just for the listeners who didn't hear that last episode. I had I was excited about it because I like Scooby Doo and I like
Yeah.
Supernatural. Had no idea how it was going to work or if it was going to be just a little too gimmicky, and it worked. It worked so well,
I
and
know.
especially for a show that had been on so long. And you know, I'm sure there was a contingent that was like, "Oh, they've done so many episodes. Now they're doing a cartoon." But damn, if it wasn't a
I know.
delightful
I know.
episode of TV, it worked so well, and
Yeah.
it didn't work so well in spite of like the mixture. It like it worked so well together. It
Oh,
was unreal how good of an episode it was. So
yeah.
sir, I will follow your Flash, your Green Lantern, your Aquaman. When they give you your Omega Bandman Black Label
Oh,
series, I'll be there.
I have a pitch. I have a pitch. I'm ready. So funny.
But yeah, Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming on to talk
Yeah.
DC Comics with me. I wish you the best of
Thanks,
luck
Jimmy.
with
I appreciate it.
the Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps and Aquaman. So listeners, let me know what it is you're reading, especially if you're picking up Green Lantern or Aquaman. Let us know that you like it. You can find me on Blue Sky or TikTok with pictures of I talk about comics on TikTok, and also there's plenty of videos of my new puppy Barry. He's a golden
Oh,
retriever.
oh,
So there's a lot of Run Barry Run being said in
that's
my
great. That's
house.
great. Yeah, good, good.
But yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right,
Thank you,
boss.
listeners, for listening, and I'll see you next time.